Hello, my name is Brayden Oski.
And I'm Austin Morales, and you're watching The Inner Gamer On.
And today we'll be talking about all the crazy issues that have been going on with Cyberpunk 2077 and CD Projekt Red. It was a game that was probably one of the most hyped, if the most hyped games of all time. And they've had a rough week. Lots of things going on with poor launch, lawsuits, potential development, management issues, all kinds of stuff. So we're here to talk all about it right here. Let's dive in.
And as always, if you enjoyed this content, please like and bang that bell, cuz do it for Cyberpunk. Or don't do it for Cyberpunk. Yeah, stick them in the face by banging that bell. Yeah, that'll show them.
First, we have to talk about gaming news this week. We didn't want to talk about this in the last segment because we wanted to just talk about all the positives first. But right. Now we're going to talk about some negatives with Cyberpunk 2077 that occurred during the launch week.
So sad.
A lot of shit went down. And we're going to kind of go through a little bit of it, the timeline of things that happen, focus around mostly the console version. But it's been a little bit of a mess for CD Projekt Red, causing them to lose a lot of money, lose a lot of reputation, and just a lot of respect in the industry.
Lay it on us, Brett. I want to hear all about this.
Yeah.
There's nothing I like more than seeing someone fall from grace.
Yes, right. So first off, Cyberpunk 2077 came out, obviously. And PC had some bugs, had some issues, but more notably on console, it was very, very buggy. Not buggy that a couple fixes will take care of it or whatever, but before the game came out, all the review companies and stuff like that were all sent PC codes. Nobody was sent console codes. And they thought that was kind of weird, but they were like, well, maybe they'll just come later, something of that nature. But all the review copies that were released were all on PC. And then all retailer or review sources and stuff like that didn't really get console copies until right when the game comes out, when the day one patch was out and all that stuff took place. So, and even with that patch, it was a very different game, but it still had lots and lots of issues. And it was very clear once that came out why that was intentionally not given to reviewers, because it would have resulted in a very different review score. So things that are happening for people are bugged quests, NPC companions disappearing completely, glitches that prevent people from completing a tutorial, people falling through the ground and just flying through the air. And one shot that I saw was somebody recording an area where there's supposed to be lots and lots of people, but if you're playing on the base PS4, basically there's 5 people walking around and the colors look terrible and it just doesn't look good. And then it takes you have to walk up to a person's face before their textures load in, so you can't even tell what their face looks like until you're right up next to them. Just a bunch of weird stuff that's just clearly not fit for this. This game is not fit for those consoles and wasn't thought about. So more to come on that later. Next up, Cyberpunk 2077 had seizure triggers with no in-game seizure warning, which I'm sure everybody knows this by now. If you basically start any game, they tell you at the beginning there could be sequence in this, and this should be as de facto standard. There could be sequences in this game that could cause you to have a seizure. Yep. Game Informer's Liana Rupert has epilepsy, and she played the game, and there was a brain dance. Whenever you plug into brain dance in the game, it has, and I relate to this because I was in a car accident a couple years ago and had to take tests to see if I had epilepsy. I did not have epilepsy, but now I'm at a higher risk of having epilepsy because of my accident, and I had to take tests that are meant to trigger seizures to see. It's a EEG test or whatever they call it, but it's they flash lights in front of your face.
I like how it's
meant to trigger things.
We don't know if you have seizures, so but if you do, you're about to have a seizure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so they stick all these things up in your head, and then they flash light. You close your eyes, and they flash a bunch of lights in your eyes to make you trigger a seizure. So this is kind of a similar situation.
It's a great way to figure it out.
Yeah. So it actually triggered a seizure for this woman, for Game Informer's Liana Rupert, and she had to go to the hospital. She had to go to the hospital to get better. So then she worked with CDPR, and they rushed out a hotfix to say, hey, this game will cause seizures. So that was another big problem, and that's not good because like epilepsy is not something you want to play lightly with. So that's just the little bit of icing on the cake.
Just a little bit. That's a lot of bit. Yeah. Surprisingly,
right?
But it's not.
So then, so going back to the console versions, like there was a lot of issues with being unplayable, like frame rates dropping well below 30. Really
well below 15.
Well below 15, yeah. Scandalously low resolution, pauses before textures load in, and then the world empty of NPCs. And what's interesting is that even though, I mean, this game was going to launch back in April. So imagine like what that would look like had it launched back then to where we are now. Like, I mean, who knows what it would have been like. So CD Projekt Red held an emergency call last week with investors about the issues surrounding the launch. They said and admitted that there wasn't enough focus on the game's problems in the push to get it released. They said, quotes, "We underestimated the scale and complexity of the issues. We ignored the signals about the need for additional time to refine the game on the base last-gen consoles. It was a wrong approach and against our business philosophy," said joint CEO Adam Kinski.
Mm-hmm.
So also, most of the pre-launch footage that we ever saw was from PC, and all the review copies were from PC, which ultimately was misleading for everybody because they never showed content that was on consoles. They always showed PC footage. So it wasn't ready back then, and it wasn't ready now. And then there was this refund messaging that came into play. So then they were like, "Hey, if you bought this game and you don't like it, you should go to Xbox or PS4 and seek a refund through Sony or Microsoft." And a lot of people, it's not working out because Microsoft has a pretty good flexible refund system where you get basically refunds within 2 weeks of buying a game. But on PS4, if you've started playing the game and actively getting into it, then Sony's very different about how they approach the refunds if you just like go directly to them to get it. So Sony told players that CDPR was fixing the game for people that were trying to get a refund and said that if you had complaints, you should contact CDPR directly instead of trying to get a refund from us if you just want to exchange it because it's broken or buggy. Yeah. So all of that came to a head and like pissed a lot of people off. And when people started reaching out to CDPR, they changed their messaging. Instead of saying, "Hey, you can contact Sony for a refund," they said, "Wait for us to get back to you." And that was their response to people that were on PS4 that wanted to get the refund. And then not long after that, Sony, after having talked with CD Projekt Red, decided to pull Cyberpunk from the PlayStation Store. So they just ripped it off. They're like, "It's broken. It's an issue. We're going to pull it off." And then they also said that they are going to give refunds as through Sony, not anywhere else. So Sony's going to offer full refunds, and they're allowing them to turn it back in. And then if you have a console physical edition, CD Projekt Red said you can reach out to us and we'll try and help you get a refund, even if we have to do it out of our own pocket, which they should. But, different story there.
Yeah.
So that's the gist of what went down over the course of the last week, which is a lot. But then later on, they had a call internally with their developers, and developers started grilling management over crunch, deadlines, and the poor launch. Because this was all the reason why the game launched when it did was a result of executives putting release dates on it and then changing said release dates because things continued to not be done. So developers were asking questions like, according to Bloomberg, they said that, the game still appears finished in some ways, especially with poor graphics, crashes. Even back in the day, co-founder back in January said that we are currently at a stage where the game is complete and playable, but there's still work to be done. So the employees were like, "Wait, you said the game was complete and playable, which clearly it's not. Here we are 11 months later. It's still not playable for some people. So what did you mean by that?"
Yeah.
So there's a lot of internal backlash that's been happening as well, with just people upset that they were like, "We worked our butts off on this game," and it sounds like they pushed it out, which is crazy to think that's like been 8 years of development, but it sounds like they over hyped and oversold what this game was going to be, and were not able to deliver, and they just needed to release it probably for investors and all that different stuff, and they shouldn't have.
Yeah, I wouldn't say they overhyped it, but they definitely overpromised for PC.
Yeah, I mean, I
console.
think that people overhyped it. I think it's just a community. But yeah, you're right. I think it's more they overpromise on things. Yeah, and it's funny. Back in 2018, I think somebody said that CD Projekt Red should kind of jump on the fact that meme culture is really popular right now and put funny memes and stuff inside the game. And CD Projekt Red responded and said, "Oh, the entire game is going to be a meme." Joking, but look where we are now. It is a meme. Oh man.
Yeah, this is bad. Obviously, if you got this far in the podcast, you know our thoughts about the game, and we really love it. But this is one of those things where it's the continuing problem of games being released when they shouldn't. And I understand that this probably need to come out. And what's the right answer? I don't know. Maybe the right answer is to not release it on console, which probably got that's probably where most people bought it, on last gen consoles, because you can hardly get a PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series X. And obviously it's the biggest biggest PC launch game, and it had over 1 million concurrent players on Steam, which is amazing. That was from 11 days ago. And just release it on PC. If it's not ready, it's not ready. And I think that's what CD Projekt Red has made, banked on this whole time. Not banked on, made it their motto. We're going to be up front with you. We're going to tell you. I remember I watched the first trailer for this game, and at the end of it said it will come out when it's ready.
Yeah. That
was the name of this game, literally.
Which is clearly lying now.
And at this point, they've went back on their word, and they fucked over a lot of people. Because obviously we can play it, and for the most part, it's fine. I'm sure people on PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X can play it, and it's mostly fine.
Yeah.
And now that they this is the worst PR disaster ever. Yes, I understand they need to launch it on PC, launch it on next gen, wait for everyone else. And at the very least, you come to the understanding, maybe we just don't need to launch it on last gen consoles. As shitty as that is, I know they've turned a profit, but I mean, at what cost? They're not actually going to turn a profit now, because all those refunds, they're going to start coming in from last gen.
Yeah, I'm anxious to see how that will affect their
it's
revenue
not a profit
stream now.
They have not made a profit, and now they have to spend more time on developing those last gen console versions, which is not going to be a profit anymore, because they put all that money back into that.
Well, and at this point, their stock has been dropping too, so they're losing value. Their company value is dropping
billions
as well.
Didn't they lose billions?
$1 billion worth of wealth was lost because their stock dropped 40% after this stuff started coming out, which is crazy. And then now their New York Times was doing a report on it, which is crazy that now New York Times is writing on this stuff. That's how big it's gotten. They said that there are companies that are looking to there might be a class action lawsuit coming around all of this, which because of
false marketing,
possibly committing a crime under Article 286 of the Penal Code, misrepresentation in order to obtain financial benefits.
Exactly.
So
it wasn't worth it. None of this is worth it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I agree. I think the ideal solution would have been this should have been released on PC first. Maybe if they could have, or focus on next gen consoles and brought it on PC, PS5, Xbox Series X, and then brought it out later to last gen consoles, or flip flopped and focus on last gen and then bring it out on next gen 6 months later, because that's what Grand Theft Auto 5 did, which still was buggy when it came out, but they released on last gen consoles and then next gen consoles,
playable.
but then they saved PC for a year later, because they wanted to make PC much better and more graphically sound and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So, but I think this game would have done super, super well. I mean, it did do super, super well on PC exclusively first, and then bring it out to consoles later when it's ready, as they said.
And, if they just would have came out at a certain point and been like, look, we have this engine, it's really good, and we want to have a certain quality for this game, and last gen just doesn't cut it. and I don't know who the people in there, because obviously this company is in a different country. Like whoever's like, someone made a decision to just keep it on console and to not do anything about that.
Yeah.
And the only reason I could think of that is because they wanted that revenue. Yes, they've already marketed to it's going to be on all these consoles and blah, blah, blah. But at a certain point, you would get backlash for sure. You guys lied to us. You did this. But I mean, the consequences of their actions now, I think, outweigh considerably what would the backlash would have been if they've been like, hey, we just cannot do this. Or, hey, this is going to take like an extra year to get on last gen consoles.
Well, what's even worse about it, and this is the part that's really striking, is that this game, I mean, ultimately should have been on next gen. But when they started concepting this game and coming up with it, 2012 is when they first announced it. The PlayStation 4 came out in 2013. So they should have been working on this on last gen consoles for 7 fucking years.
That's true. They had that whole time to get
They've had all that time to be put, but they weren't clearly. And it's
they're
like
focused on PC.
They've had that platform available. Like there's no excuse that this should not have worked on that if they intended to bring it out on that. Which I mean, honestly, back then, I mean, there's no reason they would have thought in 2013 that this game would have taken until 2020 when a new generation of consoles came out. So the plan all along should have been PC plus last gen, which at that time, up until they announced the game, was last. I mean, if they hadn't pushed it back to December, this still would have been released during last gen. So it's like it should have worked then because there was no next gen in conversation. Yeah. So it's a whole like big. I mean, a big.
Look, I get
bummer.
the scope of this project is ridiculous.
Yeah,
but yeah, even with, I mean, we've seen Bethesda has been tailoring their game engine to fit current gen consoles and PC, and it looks damn good, honestly. What they've done with that, like old archetype of whatever or code and made it look this good, like props to them. And I would think the same thing could be possible with whatever code CD Projekt Red has been working with.
Yeah.
I mean, it looks, the freaking 30 series runs it. I won't say just barely, but I mean, even the 20 series is pushing it. We are pushing it with the 10 series graphic card.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, if this was made with last gen technology, it shouldn't be that crazy. And it's not too hard, I would assume, to upgrade the code that they have now for their games. Obviously, it's not that hard because it looks fucking phenomenal.
Well, it's interesting too is that I was reading historically, this isn't uncommon for CD Projekt Red. And I didn't know this. But I read that the whole reason that The Witcher 1 never hit off really well is that it was rife with bugs and broken issues and all kinds of crazy stuff. And eventually it found its footing and did really well. And even I heard Witcher 3, as big of a commercial success as it was, I heard had a lot of issues when it launched and had bugs and not near as bad as what this is, obviously. But like, it was a buggy mess on, not as much on PC, but like on consoles, I think it had the same problem. But with the Witcher 3, like they were able to kind of win that back with like, not only did they bring out The Witcher 3 on PC and consoles or whatever, then they also brought it out with DLC later on that added more and refined some of the mechanics. And then they also brought out like a Game of the Year edition, which gave them even more revenue. So I feel like with this, knowing that this was coming around next gen, what they should have done is just like, brought it out on PC as this is Cyberpunk on PC, and then give it a year or 6 months even and say this is the definitive edition of Cyberpunk on next gen consoles and last gen consoles and the whole thing. Give them that extra time. They could have packaged it that way. And, and probably saved a lot of issues. But yeah, it is what it is. So
I mean, it's hard enough to do something on PC with all the different hardware and mistakes that could go wrong with just a PC in general. And you have the companies like Intel and Nvidia and all these different companies that are trying to give money to these companies to allow them to like put certain aspects in there, like ray tracing and stuff. And like you have so much to deal with, and having to do last gen, this current gen, and all the craziness that can go wrong on PC and all the different stuff. Like, that is maddening. Like, I couldn't even fathom having to work around the ever-changing, consistently breaking bullshit of different hardware and architecture of all this stuff. Like just bringing it on a PC is hard enough, but then having to work on those other things, like, yeah, it makes sense why you just be like, look, we just can't bring it out on last gen. It just can't happen. But then again, yeah, it should have been last gen ready a while ago.
Yeah. Yeah, there's not
there's no good excuses.
Yeah, there isn't a good excuse on any of that. And then I'm just nervous now for, like, they're supposedly working on multiplayer. Like, that's not coming out anytime soon.
Exactly.
Because there's a whole new slew of problems that could arise from that. Netcode issues, and they're not multiplayer. They're not a multiplayer company. I mean, they did Gwent, and that's like the extent of their multiplayer experience, I feel like. So, yeah, there's a lot of
the
stuff.
sad part is, I mean, this whole year we've been all about CD Projekt Red, but
it's like they're the greatest. They're a great company. They're like, they have everybody's best interest at heart. Look how much they've soiled their, like, reputation. Like,
I know, takes
48 hours it died, and then now it's
one moment. Yeah, $1 billion. But I mean, if they're not the company I want to fall on the sword, but we can't let them get away with this because there are issues here. And I think the whole game industry needs to know it. And again, I don't want them to be the one to do it, but if they have to be the one to do it, so be it. I mean, we can't let them get away with it, because definitely other companies are getting away with bullshit like this.
Well, I just hope
this just happens to be the biggest one.
Yeah. I just hope the developers that work there, don't let this happen. Because, I mean, clearly this was a top-down issue. And, I mean, it's very, very apparent that, the development team, like, obviously want to make a great game. They did make a great game. It's just it was mismanaged. And you hear that a lot at Ubisoft. You hear that a lot at EA has had a lot of those issues. Like, all these companies, like, it's largely with management and financial situations. That is what it comes down to. So, I don't know. They need to take a book from.
Take a page.
I don't even know who to take a page from. I would say Rockstar, but even Rockstar with all their, like, long-term development cycles and stuff like that. I mean, Red Dead Redemption Online, when it came out, was a hot pile of garbage and took a while to, like, find its footing. So it's tough.
This was, the bastion of our last bastion of hope, the shining star within the game industry. Now that's gone. Damn it, 2020, you're taking everything from us.